special T-shirt because you're a big boy.
Oh man.
Welcome to Book Club.
Except instead of books, it's games.
Oh, and instead of a club, there's us two.
But the rest of the idea is 100% the same.
As every fortnight, we play one game solidly.
Then come here to talk about it.
And we want you to do the same.
All the games are retro.
Most of them are Sega.
Some of them we've never played.
Or, we've just forgotten we've played them.
Because we're old.
Because we're old.
Because we're old.
Because we're old.
The Book Club has one central theme.
We play retro games for their quality.
Games that deserve to still be played.
There are some bonus old man memories to be had. But you don't need nostalgia if the game is awesome.
We're going to prove it.
In the Book Club.
Hello, welcome back to Book Club. What is episode 3, 4? Man, I'm losing count
4.
already. Is that a good sign
4.
that we're losing count? Episode 4. Hello, I am Bedgel, and this is Dibs Ahoy.
That's me.
That's
Hello,
you.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How have you been getting on?
Good. Oh, very good, very good. Yes, I've been having a good time with the games we've been playing for this one. So yeah, looking forward to talking about it. It's gonna be good stuff.
I know it's been funny with this one actually. How I don't know if it's coincidence or if I've been generating or sort of pushing the conversation, but the number of conversations I've had about this game on Twitter in the past week seems to. I don't know. It's just one of those games that even though it's 30 years old, it still feels current. It's still got a place. So yeah, it's come up loads. So
it's aged very well, I think, because of the graphic style as well and stuff. It's
it still looks pretty.
Yeah.
Well, there is a danger that partway through this recording, I will completely pass out. So I spent much of the last few days in A&E. Being pumped full of some seriously hardcore drugs. It's been sort of horrendous and nice in equal measure.
It sounds wild.
And, I do remember actually, and I have to say it's a little bit quiet because the good lady is next door. But I do see the same nurse in A&E each time I'm in there because I have been back a few times. She's a very nice lady. It's friendly.
Right.
Anyway, that's what I'm gonna say. But yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's been a bit of a nightmare. And obviously, we record quite late, and so this is sort of peak time for a sort of drug come down. So for start to fade, maybe just give the mic a tap. And
I just feel like in Wayne's World when Wayne goes off and Garth is just having a meltdown or something. I'm having a good time. No, anyway.
It's good.
Should we introduce the game?
Yeah, let's go to the game. Well, as ever, you can do the honours, my man. What we
Well, I've got my props at the ready. So
oh, show me.
Here we go.
Nice.
So I got the PAL version and the Japanese version. Virtua Racing Mega Drive version. That's our beast today. So. Yeah.
Listen, if this whole podcast thing doesn't work out, you've got a job made in QVC because that sales technique was brilliant. Just like the random shaking it at the front.
Oh yeah, for dramatic effect.
It worked. It made me want to go out and buy it. Either that or it wanted me to ask you to have a sit down because you look like you're having a bit of an episode.
Having a moment.
But yeah, Virtua Racing. So like I say, it's been, I don't know, it's just been all over my timeline, and I don't know whether that's because we've been playing it, and so I've just had a few sort of comments about it, and so said things out into the Twitter sphere or not, but it just seems like lots of people are talking about it, which is good, which I'm glad about.
Yeah.
So we are talking. We've specifically been playing the Mega Drive version. So that's like the core of our chat, but obviously you can't do Virtua Racing without playing the arcade version and talking about the arcade version. So we'll have a little bit of that chat as well. And for good and bad, we've had a little go on the other versions as well. And
we've been playing plenty of other versions actually. Better or worse, as you say.
Yeah, let's just say I was playing the Saturn one last night, and yeah, I'm scarred. I'm still feeling it.
Really.
But let's stay on happier times and just think Mega Drive. So this for me was probably the first time picking the Mega Drive game out since the mid 90s. I don't know about you.
Okay.
But how did you find it? Like playing it again? Good, bad?
I mean, like it was rough to start with because the frame rate, but like once I dialed in, that's when the enjoyment started coming back again. But I kind of remember it even being like that back in the day.
Yeah.
It was like, because like obviously the stuff we're going to get onto about the chip making the cartridge basically 70 quid. So like we didn't actually like buy it because that was so much money. So like our friend Chris rented it for the weekend, and I remember like the frame rate. I didn't really know about frame rates or anything like that back then. I could see certain stuff. Like I could see like in what was it, Castle of Illusion on the Mega Drive, it like ran at half the frame rate of most of the other games. It was like 30 frames, and I was like, I kind of thought it was like the animation sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like once you dial into it, it's like it's you can get on with it, and that was the big hurdle with Virtua Racing. And back then, like I said, I didn't really know that's what it was, but I did dial into it, and then I got some enjoyment out of it. But like by contrast today, where you're used to like better frame rates and stuff, it was probably a little bit more of a job getting back into it than it was back in those days. But like I say, once it started clicking, everything started like feeling good. I was having fun, enjoying it again. So yeah, that's how I felt anyway.
I've got to make the point that it does seem strange to me that there was ever a time where you didn't know about frame rates, because it's for the past 3 decades of gaming, it does feel like you've missed a frame rate. I distinctly remember the classic thing for me was bringing the home port of Daytona back and playing it, and I could tell something was up, but it was very enjoyable. I enjoyed it a lot, and you just were instantly like talking frame rate and saying, "Oh, it's so disappointing." Like how, and I'm like, "Sure, I don't really know what frame rate is, but
it was all like Richard Ledbetter from like Sega magazine.
He's
and all
always
that
known his stuff.
Yeah, and like that, I literally like all the stuff that he used to talk about is where I learned stuff from. Really, it's all the technical stuff was just from what he was writing, and then like I was kind of like started to understand it a little more, and then like you could see it actually in application in the game, and it was like, oh right, yeah. Then frame rate started bothering you once you knew what it was. And the letterboxes once I knew that they were not supposed to be there on our PAL versions, like the NTSC version, it was like, that's it, I am importing, I am not tolerating this.
I feel like there may be some rage about to come out, because I was going to say, so Virtua Racing, I think both, like obviously we had our PAL borders for the loss of the screen size, but I think both versions had like a bit of vertical clipping at the top, didn't they? I think it's like what would they have been, like natively 240 but the clip to 192 or something like that, so they both had
something
borders
like that. Yeah,
it's just our borders were even worse.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Although I feel like I'm prodding the beast saying anything about borders to you. Borders and frame rate are the 2 rage factors.
That's why the image sat in the middle of our screen, because they just didn't like bother to utilize our additional lines, even though we had like our TVs were 50 hertz and theirs were 60, so they kind of had it better in that regard.
Suckers. I think it was about this game saying, it is that extra speed is a challenge. So obviously it like brings up slowdown that bit more, doesn't it? Like it accentuates things if you haven't got the pace there. I do remember with I remember with Virtua Racing that we knew, it's, you don't have to like put rose tinted specs on and say like back in the day we thought this was super smooth and like gorgeous, and we were wowed by the polygon count. I think it's exactly like people talk about it today, and I've been reading the reviews back as well. We knew like how much it had been stripped back from the arcade, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And it was more about how impressive it was that the Mega Drive, this machine that was like 6-7 years old at that point, was able to do this at all. But I think the other factor was like by that point, the 2D games that were on Mega Drive and SNES were gorgeous. You'd had the rotoscope games, you had like the high color like Disney games, so Aladdin, Lion King looking amazing, and Flashback looking amazing, and we just got used to such beautiful visuals that it was a bit jarring. I remember it to kind of go into the 3D world, and impressive though it was, all that dithering and pop up and like low frame rate, it was a bit like, wow, I'm not sure how much I actually do like this, but yeah, agreed.
It was the first crack of the whip, wasn't it, for that kind of thing? And it's I mean, I was just so hyped to like have the game on the Mega Drive, and I suppose without the contrast of the arcade, it's an interesting point, like what I would have made of it, I guess. But I was so hyped for it. Like I was like reading Sega magazine, studying every screenshot and stuff. And it was like, I remember my teachers getting annoyed at school because I was drawing Virtua Racing all over my school books and stuff. And it was just like, I was hyped for the game. So I was willing to put up with a lot, I think. But like,
and
the gameplay was pretty good though. So
yeah, the gameplay's there, and you have to say the other bit on the graphics. You have to look the other way to what 3D was going on, and so like, because you looked at Stunt Race, which I think was 93, was it? But it's certainly like a peer game to this.
Yeah,
and, Stunt Race with its kind of like presumed lower polygon count, way lower frame rate, or at least I think on paper it ran at 12 or something, but it was like compared to Virtua Racing's 15.
When the cars like sprites as well, I don't think they're actual polygons.
The cars were sprites, and they I'm guessing it was Mode 7 they sprang around in because you could see the sides, but I distinctly remember playing that at Danny Perez's house, and and no rose tinted glasses then, because thinking, man, I cannot tell what the hell is going on in this game, because
that's what I had to dial into.
Yeah,
sure.
It was just like a massive, you'd be turning a corner and it would literally be like there were chunks of the corner missing as you went round.
Yeah. And
you have to say that even at 15 frames a second, Virtua Racing compared to that did look good.
It was on the next level actually, wasn't it? Like, I mean, I did really like Stunt Race FX, but like, it was. I mean, I did play that like a while ago, and that was hard to go back to as well. But like, just compared to like the lick of speed that Virtua Racing ran at, and just what it was chucking around, it was sort of like the next stage up, I guess, wasn't it? And I guess like the SVP chip was more powerful than the SFX chip, so I guess you could understand it.
He did a good job with it, and you're right, speed, because like it was a solid 15 frame. I did like when I'm playing it, I'm not really seeing it drop. I don't know whether it does. I think it feels like that it's pretty solid.
Feels consistent. Yeah, I think
and
so.
It is fast. Like it's you do whip around, and I guess the crucial thing is it doesn't affect the control. Like some games when there's slow down and the handling obviously goes off because you kind of lose the link between what you're pressing and how it's reacting on screen. This feels very consistent. You play it, it's very well controlled. The frame rate holds up, it's solid. Once you dial in, I wouldn't say you don't notice it anymore, but it's okay.
Yeah, because I guess like at 15 frames a second, there's always going to be a bit of like the reactions. Like if you're approaching a car and you want to go around it, like when you're at 15 frames a second, you got to do it a little bit ahead of time just so that it catches the inputs. But like say once your head is in the game, it's like, and you kind of at one with it sort of thing, then, it's all clicking and working pretty well, I think. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So.
And actually, I guess not to jump ahead into the 32X bit, but I found, obviously the Mega Drive one does have a lot of pop-in, pop-up, whatever. But I don't know, it just feels like they've been a bit more savvy about it, and I never found that it was popping up something that I needed. It did feel like it was that bit ahead. Whereas on the 32X, there were just a few times where I'm like, damn, where's the corner gone? And
it's just a little. I guess it's like I don't even know if it's. Is the resolution the same, or is it different between Mega Drive and 32? I don't know, but like the resolution kind of helped it almost because the pixels were bigger.
Yeah.
So it's like it almost masked a bunch of the pop in and the clip in and stuff. But like, on the 32X, I mean, the 32X version is the first time I actually even really acknowledged pop-up and clipping and stuff like that when we used to play that. And I was like, because I used to think like, oh, what's that? What's going on there? And I used to be, I mean, my biggest worry was that it was going to be in Daytona, which actually is funny how that one turned out, because that was a big fear of mine beforehand. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. So.
It's true, actually, you'd say about this is where we learn those phrases, because it was part of the fun at the time. You know, these games were so new that the technology and the technical aspect of it was interesting as well. You know, you'd happily sit there
definitely.
and read those. I was reading back the MMS section. You know, there's a whole big panel about the tech. You know, the polygons per second and the frame rate and all the sort of chips and stuff. And you're like, we used to lap that stuff up because it was just so new and just
it was exciting, like, you know, because it's like, you know, when the next thing comes out and it's even more, the numbers are bigger, it's like, oh, I can't wait to see it. Like, I remember when I got my Dreamcast and I remember turned it on and it, like, that little hum of the fan, but I was like, oh, that's the sound of 3 million polygons a second ticking over right there or something. You know, it was all very exciting, this stuff.
If you're listening to this and you like numbers, we got some numbers for you coming, I'll tell you that much. And I will tell you one, because I did write it down, but the resolution on 32X is 320 by 240 and the Mega Drive is 256 by 240, but both are clipped vertically to 192. See? Talk about your research.
There you go.
I mean,
on the fly.
I know.
Oh, you had it prepared beforehand.
You're right, let's not spoil it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I found it refreshingly playable coming back to it. I genuinely enjoyed it. Again, once you dialed in, like all the courses stood up well. I felt like it was smooth and the handling is brilliant. I did go back and have a go on the arcade as well, and I think they got the feel of it, you know. And
it's definitely one of the closer versions, like, compared to some of the others. I mean, it's like what I was doing on the Mega Drive version is what I do on the arcade version, and it was like, it didn't feel massively different. It felt like kind of the same game at the heart of it. So which is not the same on the others. Like even some of the closer ports. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So I guess we could talk Mega Drive or arcade, but I guess we're going to arcade. Of what's your first memory of Virtua Racing? Because this is a bit of history. So you know, this is ushering in a new era. So what do you first remember about it? Virtua Racing. Okay, I mean, well, I was aware of it from like Mean Machines and like Sega magazine and stuff like that, but I'd never seen it like in the flesh. And it was like they didn't kind of have it like, you know, they had Street Fighter 2 everywhere, but they didn't have like a big Virtua Racing coin on, like in the chip shop or something like that, you know. But so I was at Thorpe Park, and I can't remember what year it was. It was like new. It would have been like 90s, I don't know, maybe 93 or something like that, I think it was. And like I remember just walking into the arcade and there it was, and I was just like, oh my goodness. I just stood there literally just staring at it, and I was just like in awe of this thing. I was just watching the demo like go over and over and over. I did have a go at it as well, and I was like terrible at it because it was like my first crack at it. But it was I literally just stood at that machine. I couldn't care less about the rides or anything like that at Thorpe Park. I just wanted to stand there and watch Virtua Racing, and it was just like we said in our last video about Daytona. It was like, it felt like it was like from 3 generations ahead or something, because like you know, seeing the arcade next to like Mega Drive and SNES games that were around at the time and stuff like that, this was like futuristic like for sure. And I was just like just blown away by it basically. And one of the things actually, one of my takeaway memories I always remember is that it looked cell shaded. And this was kind of like, there wasn't any cell shaded games like around back then that I remember anyway, but like it was the way the colors looked and everything. It looked like a cartoon that was kind of playing out before my eyes, but like in all complete 3D and everything. It was just amazing anyway.
Yeah, there was a real vibrancy to the color, and I know what you mean, because even like now when you see it, like actually obviously when you see the Switch version, and obviously I'm sure we'll mention like the homebrew like VR game Virtua Racing sort of homage games that are coming out.
Oh yeah,
the look they've gone for is the Virtua Racing look, but again it looks
those Sega blue skies.
The Sega blue skies. And that was a massive thing on Virtua Racing. If you looked at any other arcades, like kind of, I don't know what we would have been playing in the run up to that, but they're dark. is the point. Any stand-up cabinets, not the Sega ones because they were bright as well, but a lot of the games, fighting, like arcade, scrolling, whatever it would be, the color palette is just darker and it's dirtier.
Yeah.
And this just exploded, not only with like the vibrant colors, but the massive like panoramas of sky. Like when you were driving on that first level, you know, sure there's some lovely scenery, but there's also that beautiful wide open sky. And like walking in the arcade and just being greeted like that, that's such an attention grabber. Yeah,
Totally. That was the thing. I mean, it was the mid in the middle of that arcade. Everything else was revolving around it, sort of. But this was the showpiece, like coin op.
And you have to give it credit, like all those Sega machines, for that sort of good sort of mid 80s to late 90s. That the cabinet was immense. You know, they put a lot of work into that. Obviously, the design of it was attention grabbing. It was gigantic. The screen was gigantic, and it just was such a such a showstopper. And obviously, I know we'll probably come to it later, but the VR buttons, you know, I remember sitting there, like first go, the first time I got to sit in it, that is all I wanted to do. I was quite happy, literally, just to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and like scroll through them. Like you just
it was novel.
Yeah, you just forget.
It was the first time I'd ever seen that, and I know, like you say, we'll come on to something a bit later where something predated it, but like I had never even seen such a thing before, and it was just like amazing.
But I just remember really feeling like it was a party trick, because I was there with my dad, and you know, I wanted him to be into the arcades as well and stuff, and it was just something you could show off. You were like, you know, you think computer games is this. Look, actually, come and look at this. Watch how I can change the views and stuff. And it did impress him, you know, a completely non-computer games person. It was attention grabbing for sure. Mine was like, would have been in Eastbourne, like on the pier, and just again, like what they did with the Daytona machine later, they just plonked that right at the front entrance, first thing you see when you come in. It was just it was a beaut. I don't remember it being there long. And it was a good chunk of time between that and Daytona, but I don't know when it would have been that I actually first saw it here.
Yeah, I never saw it in Eastbourne actually. I somehow missed it. I don't know.
No, it was there. But then we used to go. I remember, like me and Devon used to go, like a fair bit when Daytona was around, and more Sonic Blast men for Devon. But I went a few times with my dad, and I remember that being there. Because of course the other one that I swear blind it was there, but no one has ever seen it. I don't think you did. Was that G-Log R360 was there as well?
Oh, I never saw it in Eastbourne. Nah.
Yeah, but it was because I would have never seen it anywhere else. So now I can picture it. Like I know where. Like it was in the same place where later on they put the Virtua Fire stand-up machine. It's like kind of a little offshoot room thing. Anyway, but because I just didn't really go to any other arcades, I don't think so. Everything I saw would have been there, but just everything about it was just fantastic, and it did set the bar high. And obviously for the Mega Drive home port, it was always going to be a challenge, but it's worth. I guess we go back to comparison, but it's worth just dwelling a little bit on what Virtua Racing meant for Sega and what it meant for the arcades, because we obviously knew immediately as we walked in that this was breaking new ground, but it really was. And so it's worth kind of going into it. So we know this was the CG model, which like later became known as Model 1. And like we were talking just before about how it's always wrapped up with the history of Yu Suzuki, and Yu Suzuki's well known for kind of coming in and wanting to develop the game and wanting to develop like the architecture at the same time. I was saying to you, I was reading these Hideki Sato interviews, and it was very much talked about as it was a Sega plan to build out like the 3D graphics engine, and but they recognised they didn't have the team skills. We hear a lot about Sega's development skills as in sprite-based games, and they're very good at 2D and all of that. But apparently Yu Suzuki is a bit of a maths genius and was very keen to get into that side and to take on the challenge and stuff and put his hand up. And so initially, obviously, it sounds like he was involved early, but initially it sounds like it was very much a kind of Sega R&D drive because they recognised the need for 3D. If you've picked up on that, because it's like,
yeah, well, I was like, I mean, like obviously they kind of had that like mock 3D, I suppose, with the super scalar games, like you know, you had your Outruns, your Space Harrier, and all that sort of stuff. And I suppose it was the next step, wasn't it, going to polygons and that? Because like, yeah, I was reading that. I think it was like 1988. They were kind of talking about moving into this area, and then by 1989 they were actually hiring people to develop these boards and start playing around with this stuff. So they obviously had the idea to be going in this direction like pretty early, I guess. So I mean, they're obviously, like we were saying earlier, I think even like Atari had played around with some polygon games before and stuff, like, but nothing on the level that Sega kind of had in mind. And that is why kind of like, you know, when Virtua Racing came out, it did feel so far ahead, and that because they'd really put a lot into the board.
Yeah, it seems strange actually, because later, certainly in the console wars, Sega was often kind of accused retrospectively of going too early. You know, like coming to market with a product that sort of later would be outdone and stuff. But in this one, they timed it just right. So because like I think it was the System 21, Namco worked with Atari, and they both like developed stuff for it. So they were doing polygons like sort of like contemporaneously with Sega, and they had working games doing polygons before Virtua Racing came out. But of course, you look back on them now and you think they're not going to wow you walking into Thorpe Park arcade. They were not. And
that was the difference between Sega. It's like, you know, that people saw these games and then you hear them talking about it like at school or whatever. It's like, you know that they've walked in, seen this thing that's like so amazing looking, and it's just like left this huge impression of them. Because it's like, you know, I know, no disrespect to Ridge Racer and stuff like that, but like next to Daytona, it looks mortal, you know. It's like, you know, it's like someone wouldn't like have gone into an arcade necessarily and seen that, and then like it made such an impression as like Daytona, like, because like obviously Ridge Racer got a lot of credit because it was a really good conversion on PlayStation, and it was really good graphically. But then like when you put it next to Daytona, it's just like, you know, I heard people like compare it to like putting the Mona Lisa next to like a children's scribble or something like that. And it's like, you know, I do like Ridge Racer, just getting that out there. But like you know, it was the contrast, wasn't it, between these things. And Sega always just blew people's socks off with these things.
You know what though? Like I always remember the history very much as Sega led, Namco followed. But do you remember, like we were talking earlier, saying that if I have this right, so the history goes, so that System 21, some real basic polygons, like Namco and Atari both did some stuff on it, and then but Namco's System 22 was able to do not only like I think it's slightly higher polygon count. I think it's like 200 and something thousand polygons a second versus Virtua Racing's like 180. But System 22 could do texture mapping, and it could do Gorad shading, and obviously eventually it was that system which they used for Ridge Racer. And but apparently they were there first. So at the arcade show in Japan in '92, so the JAMA, where Virtua Racing got its like first like public outing.
Right.
Like, Namco were there with their Sim Driver game, which you know had texture mapping, had Gorad shading, and wasn't released, and so was, I'm not sure how good a game was. I think it was like based on that earlier Mazda game, but it was then that was like the I guess the prototype that then went on to become Ridge Racer like the year after Virtua Racing stuff. But yeah, I never remembered it that way around at all. You know, I remembered it being Virtua Racing, Sega were first, and Sega were first with texture mapping, and actually Namco were doing it.
Yeah, they were doing it, but I guess maybe because I remember in the magazines at the time, like I didn't even know about Ridge Racer until they started talking about it in conjunction with like this game that's really good apparently that's coming out on the PlayStation. Because it was like you say, like even though these things were around at the time. Like Virtua Racing was like in all the magazines, everyone was going on about it, and it's like Sega weren't resting on their laurels. Like, it's like even after Virtua Racing, they then like wanted an even bigger spectacle, and that's when they did like the 8-player Virtua Formula thing that we played at the Trocadero and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like, and like the basically Virtua Formula, they got, I think they got like people from AM4 and 5 to kind of work on it, to kind of upgrade Virtua Racing, because they wanted like it to be this even bigger spectacle at their like at their big like arcades and like amusement centers that they had going on at the time. And that's why, like, because do you remember we went to the Trocadero, and it was like the year before it became Sega World, I think it was. And you walk in, and to your right there was this entire wall of Virtua Formula. It's basically the same game as Virtua Racing, like with very little tinkering, but like basically huge cars that you can sit in, and there's like was 8 of them all lined up, and it was like just the crowd was just all around this thing, and it is that spectacle. It's like you go into that arcade, that's what you come out remembering, like what I mean. And it was even the other stuff that they had in it, like they had like this, I don't know if you remember, there was like this virtual commentator called Vert McPolygon, who is actually he's in the Switch version when
in
you,
the little
you're
corner,
loading it up. Yeah, he's in the corner, and I was like, Vert McPolygon, because I remember, like, it's like, because like obviously we were all over the Virtua Formula like coin ops and stuff, but like at some point you have to kind of go and play some of the other games and stuff. But like I remember walking deep into the arcade, and there was like a screen like set up with Vert McPolygon on it, like kind of telling you about what was going on back at the Virtua Racing coin and stuff. And it was just like, oh man, what are we doing? Let's get back there and stuff. But, it was just like,
it's weird. I feel like a strange kind of privilege actually that we did go to the Trocadero, and we did experience not just Virtua Formula, but that what would be Sega World in its pomp, because it was that arcade was immense, but that we did get to see and play Virtual Formula, because I wasn't at Woodstock, I wasn't at like Nirvana 92 for Reading, and I wasn't at like Radiohead at Glastonbury, but we did go and play Virtual Formula at the Trocadero.
We were there, we were there when it counted.
And I think like that was the zenith of Sega's arcade experience coming to show, because obviously Daytona would do an 8-player link up as well, right? I don't think I ever saw that in full pomp, but
no, I don't think I did actually either.
And it's,
but actually, you know what? Actually, before I forget, the one thing that I was going to say, and this is one of the things that gets missed nowadays with the modern conversions that I remember being amazed at the time, was when we was on that trip to the Trocadero, was when you're on the in-car view, and people have you could see the hands of the kind of guy made out of polygons, but it mimicked exactly what the actual guy playing the coin op was doing. And I just remember being like, oh my goodness, this is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. And it's like a detail that obviously these days you're not going to get to see, unless, I suppose, if you have a wheel, maybe it could, like, you get the same kind of effect. But like I just remember like standing there watching these guys, and the movements of the real arms with what was on screen was like just identical, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, that's one of my big memories that I always remember, like of that trip.
Do you know what's funny actually is and this is only now like a couple of years ago, when I first got an Oculus and did virtual reality at the, at a proper level for the first time, and seeing your own virtual hands in like in the game. It was a similar kind of feeling, but it took like another 28 years for them to have another wow moment with like computer graphics like that. But it was huge. I also remember, now this is a memory I don't think I've ever actually shared even with you, but certainly with anyone else. I did feel a certain pride that was such a good trip, because me and my dad had done two trips. One, we went like with this guy Alan, who maybe like a year or two before that, and we'd gone up to London and we'd gone to a train fair, like to see model trains. And I got
That's
this,
actually pretty cool. I quite like that.
well, maybe you should have been around, because I got the distinct impression afterwards that Alan was very unimpressed.
Oh man,
I don't really remember us being friends after that. And so
that finished it off. Oh man.
So obviously when we went up, I was a bit like,
Yeah.
man, I hope this isn't another Alan situation. Like it's
Oh
gonna
man, no way.
Because I also distinctly remember driving over the bridge that it must lead to sort of the Parliament area, and like Paradise City came
Paradise
on the radio.
City.
And it was like, this is a good trip.
Yeah, and you know that was actually the first time I ever went on virtual reality as well. Do you remember, like in the basement?
Yeah.
And, like it's got the kind of big escalators that go up, and right down the bottom.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it had the real old school virtual reality things, and we went on it, and I think it was like some kind of tank thing.
I was going to say, it's like, I can actually close eyes and picture it. It was like kind of had a really reddy, browny, burgundy colour to the whole thing, and like,
right, yeah.
But
I mean, like I was really confused. I couldn't really tell what was going on, but it was pretty hype going on virtual reality.
Yeah, same. But Jesus, you talk about frame rates. I remember that was like you'd look pan around
that
like
was
that, and it would be like like that. It was pretty horrendous. So yeah, you know, obviously history wise, this was huge, and like Sega with the Model 1 kind of made their first like massive leap into 3D architecture, and for Yu Suzuki, it obviously took him in new directions as well, and it was the burgeoning war with Namco, which I think you have to say, Namco, fair play, they made some good arcade games, and you know, each of their versions of Sega games was a decent game in its own right. They were just never like anywhere near as good as the Sega versions, but you know, but they did okay. But it's one thing we should mention as well is, again, reading these Hideki Sato interviews, that they were also competing with Street Fighter. You know, you mentioned it earlier, saying the arcades were flooded with one thing before Virtua Racing, and that was Street Fighter arcades. And you know, that fighting games generally, but Street Fighter in particular, was just so popular.
I know. I sometimes try and explain like to my kids what Street Fighter was like, and the only thing I related to was like okay, like think of when like a Harry Potter book or something like that comes out, or like the movie. It's like the biggest thing ever, and that's like what Street Fighter was. It was like the biggest thing in the world. It was like you know, even when it wasn't on Sega machines, it was on the front of Sega magazines and stuff like that.
Always.
It was just like
one of them would have it, like, wanted every issue.
Everyone wanted a slice of Street Fighter, and it was just like it was so huge, and it's like I can't even explain like how massive Street Fighter 2 was. It was everywhere. It was like in every corner shop, every chip shop, every bowling alley. Like even like they never had a coin op before, but they would get a Street Fighter 2 machine just to get a piece of that pie. It was just everywhere.
It is so good you've set that scene, because that is what they were dealing with. You know, it's like you got to think. They were. Like, I think when we look back, so again, I've heard this variously from the Sega interviews as well. Yes, they were fighting Namco, but actually, the money was with Street Fighter. You know, ultimately they needed the division to be successful and to turn a profit and all of that stuff, and the money was with Street Fighter, and they needed things to wow people. And those Street Fighter moments, you know, it's not as obvious now because it was a 2D game, but it was so beautiful and so impressive, and it dragged people in, and they were fighting that. And he does talk, Hideki Sato, in these interviews about that is what then drove the development into texture mapping and into Daytona.
Looking at Virtua Fighter and stuff.
Basically saying like Virtua Fighter was impressive, but you know, Street Fighter was so pretty because obviously sprites were so beautifully drawn and full color, and you know, and they had all those advantages. So they were trying to say, how can we recreate that wow moment with our 3D games? And you know, no doubt they would have driven there anyway. But that was kind of the profit logic of it. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you do think, I always think, oh, it was like Sega, Namco, and because the 3D games obviously had such a mirror between them and stuff. But yeah. It was also that. So it was interesting looking back on who the main guys were in Virtua Racing, because obviously we always think Yu Suzuki was in his like 80s track record, and then what AM2 did throughout the 90s was like massive, and he's you know, you can't mention Virtua Racing without talking Yu Suzuki as well, and he does deserve massive credit, because I think it is borne out that he did have a huge hand in developing the Model 1 board, Model 2 board, Model 3 board, and obviously onwards So he needs a good mention. 3 cheers for you.
Oh yeah, shout outs to you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean he's a legend, and it's like I do sometimes feel like he doesn't get the credit he deserves, but
yeah,
it's I mean he led so many things. I mean like Virtua Fighter alone like influenced so many things, like even stuff like Tomb Raider and stuff like that. They saw Virtua Fighter and like took inspiration from it like for that game, and obviously that game got massive and that, but
it's weird,
was inspired by what he'd done.
It's weird how I think any arcade kid would probably put Yu Suzuki in the top 3. For me, it's maybe top 1, because my top 10 has got more Yu Suzuki games in it than any other developer, but he just doesn't get. I don't think it's even the credit. I think it's the recognition. I don't think name recognition even seems that. Yeah. But again, you look back at the magazines at the time, and he was a celebrity. He was well known.
Man, yeah.
He was the man. Yeah. Like they talked about him openly in the same breath as other big sort of SNES and Nintendo developers would get.
Yeah, Miyamoto and stuff like that. Like he was the Sega Miyamoto, I guess, wasn't he? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like. I mean, I often feel Sega gets overlooked with a lot of their stuff because, I suppose, there's a whole generation that's come up since Sega even released the console before, last. But yeah, I don't know. It's just that's why we got to do these shows, make sure these people don't forget these guys. We were there and we remember. It was.
I guess a big part of it is like a Nintendo IP is always a flagship game, and so as a Miyamoto game would always be top press. It would always get there. Yeah. Whereas Sega, it had broader game set and had other IPs and stuff which weren't Yu Suzuki, and that was part of it. And I guess just from mid-90s onwards, Sega fans would recognise his work and would continue to love him all the way through Shenmue and onwards and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe non-Sega fans, the general Joe blogs didn't know the games, so didn't know Yu Suzuki. But the other one was, and you knew this because I remember talking to you about it, but I didn't realise it at the time. The other big one was, I'm just looking down so I get his name right this time, as I got it wrong last time. Your man Takanobu Mitsuyoshi.
Oh yeah.
Rate my pronunciation, because
good,
I knew Daytona, everyone knows Daytona, but I didn't actually realise that. Well, I knew him for the singing. I didn't know he was an actual music composer and producer and all the other way. Yeah. And actually, his credits very closely aligned to AM2. So, he did Cage Maru in Virtua Fighter, but he co-wrote the music for Virtua Racing. Interesting. I was going to say earlier, actually, that was the other thing that really stuck out when I first played Virtua Racing. Back Virtua Racing recently, was the lack of ongoing music. It's deliberately stylistically just at the checkpoints and time and stuff, but we're so used to Daytona,
just playing the whole
Sega
time.
Rally,
I always like that though, because I love those little ditties that play at the checkpoint. So I always
it's cool.
I mean, it was weird, but I think one of the things I said to you was playing back the Switch version and stuff like that, was when I heard the sound of that engine, that was the real thing that nailed the nostalgia for me. And I guess if the music was playing the whole time, it wouldn't have been quite so clear or something. But it's when I was playing that Switch version, it was oh man, that takes me back past the Mega Drive version to the actual arcade in those early 90s and stuff. And yeah, I don't know, maybe if the music was covering over that so much, I wonder if that would be detracted slightly. I don't know, maybe.
Well, I've always had a bit of a theory with Yu Suzuki, actually, that he likes, what he really craves is realism. That he's, which is a funny thing to say about someone who's made such amazing arcade experiences. You think Space Harrier realism, what really? But I don't know, you look at Virtua Racing and then what he did with F355, it was Virtua Racing is arcadey. The handling is simple, and it's and you can get away with stuff, and it's just generally designed to go fast and have fun. But it's stuff like the strip back music, the engine sound being there, the pit crew, like the design of the car itself, I guess the courses, the handling, you know, it feels to me like he wanted to have intelligent physics and do something that was a bit more realistic than just arcadey. And then you see it going through for 5. I guess you could say the same about Shenmue, and it's like, I don't know, there's a thread. And I did read an interview with him saying, you know, someone said, oh, what's your favourite game? And he said, I don't play games, I'm just interested in the development of the games. And I'm like,
it prefers like movies and stuff, doesn't it, or something?
You can't take it too far, because obviously a lot of his games, like Daytona being the classic arcade experience, but, you know, are very non-realistic. But I don't know, I just get the impression that at its heart, his sort of passion projects were things that just were complex and a bit more realistic. Anyway, round through. I was going to say the other things that your man Takanobu Mitsuyoshi did, because he did Daytona, Virtua Fighter, I didn't know, like the music, that is. Shenmue, Sonic games, Sonic Mania, Sonic Superstars. He's worked on the Yakuza series, Like a Dragon series, and the one that I never knew, because like I only ever really played the Sega Rally version at home, was Sega Rally, like arcade. So obviously the home version, not him. And no, if I'm honest, I prefer the home music, but the arcade one's very good.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good starting block, wasn't it? Because I mean, the Saturn version was the arcade tunes for the most part, but they just like spiced it up a bit, didn't they?
Yeah. And so, what was that the main thing I wanted to say about him? Oh yeah. But he was obviously works closely with him, and that's the sense you get when you look at the credits all the way up to the Switch version. You know, through those AM2 games, it was clearly a close-knit team that built around Yu Suzuki and stayed with him and stayed working on the games all the way through. So many names pop up, and it's not that rare, like along a series, you know, like say like a Shining Wisdom series or a Sonic series, for the names to be the same. But obviously at AM2, the games jumped around all over the place of what the type they were making, but so many people stayed with it. Right. Something unique about them, I think. Anyway, there you go.
Oh, they were legends.
Legends, Sam. Love it. Well, let's go back then to the Mega Drive, because that was the arcade hype. You know, this beautiful, massive 180,000 polygons, beautifully sharp, bright screen machine, somehow condensed down to a sort of 6-7-year-old, like 16-bit machine with
very small.
that previously had done games with about 5 polygons in it, and just wasn't built for it. So I will help with this, but how did they do it?
Oh, well, they had a little bit of magic in the cartridge called the SBP chip, if that's what you're angling for. So basically,
we're slick, man. We're so slick.
Oh yeah, that was seamless. Yeah, so obviously, like SNES, had Star Fox with the SFX chip, and Sega were like, well, we'll have some of that action, but they had to go one better. So yeah, they produced the SVP chip, which was actually, they were calling it initially the DSP chip, like digital signal processor, but I think that's a term that you can apply to many things. Actually, I think there was one of those chips even in the Pilot Wings cartridge. So SVP chip is like,
so I think if I understand, I'm no techie, but if I understand it right, the DSP is, the idea is that is a graphics chip. You know, it's like one that you send it do the 3D geometry over there, DSP, and then send it back to the CPU to make the game. And so I think generic name for it, but I think that is what it's doing.
Yeah. But so they made the chip, and it certainly skyrocketed the price of that cartridge, because it was like, you know, I mean, what were games coming out late at the time? It was like about 45 quid, wasn't it? I think at the time for like a 16 meg car, and I think was Virtua Racing 16 meg. I can't even remember what it was for Mega. For Meg. But anyway, so this cartridge came out like 70 quid and stuff, which I think was I think the only other cartridge that was that much was like Phantasy Star 4 or something, because it's I I don't know if it was well, it had a battery backup in that game and stuff like that. But yeah, it was right up there.
Yeah, because did I read? Because I played the Mega Drive one on an emulator, but did I read? So they did away with the battery backup for the Virtua Racing cartridge because that would have just tipped the price up even higher.
But yeah, I guess it would have. Yeah.
But yeah, 70 quid. No, that's one of the things we talked about on Twitter because I distinctly remember like getting Starwing, and that was it might have been 50 actually, but it was definitely more than other games.
Yeah,
and I remember thinking, oh, that's pretty punchy, but it's so like cutting edge. I've got to have it.
Yeah.
But
that was a great game. Yeah.
But I mean, 70 quid. It's worth saying that it wasn't universally accepted. You know, it was we couldn't afford it. We didn't get it at the time.
Yeah,
and
that was why rental came into play.
Yeah, and I was reading back through like Mean Machine Sega and who did the review, Gus and Lucy, I think. And basically, they're basically what they're saying. I think Lucy was she was scathing. She was biting into it, saying, "Yeah, it's very good, but no game is worth 70 quid, and I wouldn't say this is a mega game because it does." And I'm like, yeah, I think that's true. You know, you got to think. Ultimately, it did just have 3 tracks, and
people went on a lot about the 3 tracks. Yeah,
you know, and even back then when games generally didn't have like massive like panoply of options and tracks and stuff, that was pretty narrow, and you just think, 70 quid, you could get like 2 or 3 other games at the time for that price, and it was a challenge. And I think rental was the right option. You know, I
got it. Like a boot fare, but eventually
it's
it's like when it was actually, I think it was like a 3 quid or something, but I had to wait a while, but I eventually got it. So.
I was going to say, weirdly, when we were first saying about doing this episode, we did have a look at the prices, and it's like cartridge only is like 10-15 quid on eBay, and you think compared to other big Mega Drive games, that's pretty small, especially because you think it can't have sold that well. You know, obviously it was a big game.
I don't know.
But at 70 quid, like, it can't have sold that well. So normally that would push the price up, but maybe not. Maybe it did shift a few. But so 70 quid, a lot of people had a problem with it. And I think it was, up against SFX. I mean, I think it hands down won that battle, in my opinion. Like we were talking earlier about
they had
Stump Race, but
they had to do the SFX too to kind of like, you know, push on from to try and keep up with it, I guess. So
and it didn't solve all their problems. So if you talk the differences now, you had Mega Drive was coming in at 6,500 polygons per second. I think bedtime. 6,500.
I've got a fly bugging me right now too. So
you love it.
It's all falling apart.
Which is, it is amazing if you think that is like, it's not even a half, a third. It's like less than a tenth of third. Well, what is it? A 20th of the polygons of what the arcade is shifting. And then I think the color palette as well. Like I never really thought about it until sort of just reading a few of the reviews back from the time. But that the color palette on the Mega Drive really did present other problems because those like flat shaded games. They need the differences in colour to show you the variations in texture. You know, you think about those like polygon drawn hills and stuff, and if you can't do like darker shades and light shades to show the shadows, and the 3D effect just sort of like fades away. And Mega Drive obviously struggled with that. I think it had 15 colours on screen compared to like even the 32X had like 256.
Cross-hatching. Right.
That like dithering and just sort of gave it that blurry effect. And I think I was reading as well saying I think it was slightly pinched in at the sides, and so when it was displayed on the telly, it would like stretch out again, which made it even more softer and blurrier. So it did look muggy. You know, it's the SVP did wonders, but it's it was still on 16-bit hardware and stuff. And
I think that was the thing with it, wasn't it? 'Cause it's like it had to adhere to the rules of 16-bit, like the resolution and stuff like that, which you know, when you're flying forward at Virtua Racing, you try to discern, like, you know, a couple of pixels up there. It's like, is that a car? Is that a corner? What is that sort of thing? But yeah, it didn't always make it easy. But
but I have to say, and I know we'll mention this again when we talk other versions, but you know, there wasn't a corner on the Mega Drive one where I couldn't work out what I was doing. But on the 32X one, which one? It must be on the Bay Bridge, where there's like you go through a sort of bendy bit, and then there's like a little dip going down, and then it does a hard right, and you have to like really slam the brakes on. On the 32X one, you cannot see the fences coming. Like you just have to learn by mistake and remember it. But on the Mega Drive one, it's very blurry. It's not really clear what you're looking at, but you know there's a barrier, and it's like, So you know,
they just captured that better. Yeah, there was something about the 32X one actually. Like I think it was they added those 2 new tracks, and the first of the new track, I can't remember what it's called. No, it's gone from my head. Hill something or other.
We'll put it on the screen. It'll be fine.
Yeah, but I was struggling on that one because it was like I could just, because there's a lot of fences actually in that one, thinking about it, and I could not tell what was coming up and stuff, and it was literally only learning the track rather than like the actual reacting to what I was actually seeing. That was the thing that helped me. That track. I mean, I think actually I recorded some footage and I actually quit that track because I was like, I'm done. I'm not playing that one again. I can't be doing that.
Yeah, I had very much the same with that Saturn one, which I'll tell you about.
Right.
I just wanted to mention though that obviously the SVP chip. There's a lot. I think we both sort of picked up on different threads of this actually. A lot of chat about SVP like becoming 32X, and you know, some even tell it the story that the SVP was the basis of the 32X. Some tell it more generically, saying it was sort of the idea.
Obviously grew out of it. Yeah.
Like what's the sort of angle you've heard on it, like, or read on it?
Oh, so I remember, like, I think it was after Virtua Racing had actually come out, and there was like, it was quite near the front of the magazine, like in the news section probably or something, in like Sega magazine. This is I'm talking about. And there was like this box, and it had like all these all the what the chip could do basically, and it could do stuff like I don't even remember, like Street Fighter 2 on the Mega Drive, like like the distorted sound was because they were putting 2 lots of sound basically through one channel. But this it was saying stuff like the SFX can do like multiple different channels for sound effects and all this stuff. It was kind of like that sort of thing. It was like just a box, and it had like basically all the kind of abilities of the chip, like and what it could do. And like I think I can't remember if it was actually in that same article or issue, or if it was a bit later, but they were talking about stuff like, because the chip was so expensive, they would sell it as like a kind of thing that you would then buy the game to plug through. So it was like you said earlier, like a bit like Sonic and Knuckles, and then you plug like Sonic 3 into the top. So you would have the chip in like a separate kind of like thing, and you plug the Virtua Racing game into it to utilize the chip. So they just basically don't have to sell it the whole time in every cartridge, and then incur that cost like for both themselves and the player. But like, yeah, so it was kind of interesting when the 32X kind of got announced, because it was kind of like the it was that kind of idea, but then expanded obviously to new heights, and that like trying to get 32-bit technology in there and stuff. So yeah, it was kind of interesting.
And obviously it's an idea that is exactly what it did, and I read that same things, and I'm not sure why Sega didn't go with the idea of like launching it as a plug through, because presumably the technology inside the car, that's probably what it's doing, you know. It's like it's got the game ROM and it's got the car, and it's like playing it through. Why they didn't go with it, I mean, obviously they didn't come back to it, and maybe they knew they wouldn't come back to it. Maybe they knew,
I guess maybe they were near the end.
Is just going to outstrip this. There's no point pursuing it. But
I think maybe it's because it was like so late in the Mega Drive's life. Maybe they just kind of then were looking to the 32-bit kind of thing, perhaps a lot more, perhaps, you know. That's, I mean, I guess that, I mean, because that was like 94, wasn't it? Virtua Racing came out, and Saturn came out in 95, so they were kind of wrapping things up a bit, I guess.
And it's you know, it's been said a few times about Sega's plan was a bit muddled. I don't think I don't think simplification was ever their thing, was it? Because it was, you know, they did this SVP chip. They were still obviously they were still plugging Mega CD. They 32X was on the horizon. They released the Nomad that same year, I think.
32X CD as well, with the combination of all three. Yeah.
You know, and then obviously the Saturn was like well into development already, and would be released like not long after.
Well, it was actually out in '94 in Japan, wasn't it?
Like late '94. So, you know, you just think they were just, I mean, bless their little hearts. They just released so much, and I think of all of them, you know, a lot of people look at the 32X and say what a kind of squandering of resources it was and how it distracted. And you kind of have to say a similar thing about SVP, because you just think it was a technical achievement and it was impressive and it was cool. And like at the time, I did really want it. But at the same time, they maybe just sort of like were so, you know, it's that like Jurassic Park, isn't it? It's like they thought so much about whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should, because obviously it did show up. It was impressive for the Mega Drive, but it did show up its limitations, and you know, and I thought,
you know, partly I found like the fact that they were doing all this stuff. I know it was kind of like part of the reason they ended up with no money. Like that, but it was so exciting. It was like it was like every time you opened a Sega magazine, it was like there was some new idea or some new thing that they were doing, and it was like, they shot themselves in the foot, I guess, eventually by doing so much of these things. But like, it was just so like interesting, and it was like, you know, I remember picking up like NMS, Nintendo Magazine System, and it was just normal news, normal reviews. There was no like real hype about like, oh, they're doing this really exciting thing, trying it out and stuff. And it was just like, that's what I always really liked about Sega. It was like, you know, they were just it was like they were just going nuts, like just, you know, like they heard about this thing, right, we're doing that, and it's like, get some people on that right now and stuff. And it was like,
and of course,
no messing around.
It did come back to bite them, you know, because you look at the sell-through numbers for 32X, and they went nuts for it. And they built, what was it, 800,000 and sold like 200,000 or something. And you think, their plan was a bit crazy. And obviously, over the years, Nintendo would innovate, and they, you know, they've done loads of things over the years to, you know, with handhelds and with the Switch, with their main home.
Virtual Boy, that was quite interesting.
But they always did it at Nintendo's pace. You know, it was always quite steady, and you know, let's try a new thing. Okay, here we go. And so we just be like, chuck that out there and chuck that. Because they did, because I think I don't know at the time or more recently, but one of the Model 1 projects as well was virtual reality headset, wasn't it? They got quite far down that road, and
and for the Mega Drive.
And
they had pictures of it and stuff. Actually, they did have some prototypes up and running as well, I think. Apparently, it wasn't the best, but you know.
Well, you think it's only now with effectively like supercomputers at home, you know, that we're really able to get into it. You just think, well, of course it didn't work back then. Yeah. So I guess the one thing we were talking SVP 32X, so I think idea was right. I was saying to you before, like I think I understand SVP was like some kind of Samsung chip, whereas the 32X had those Saturn Hitachi chips in it. And so architecture-wise, I do think they differed, but it's, you know, it's clear the genesis of the idea was kind of born from the same place and stuff. And it's, I don't know, it's always tricky with the 32X because you think it did do interesting things, and there was excitement about it. You know, I was like reading some of the back issues before, and you know, developers did seem interested in it first, and for a while it was ahead of the pack. It just bearing in mind how early they were planning the 32-bit machines, they would have known how quickly it was going out of fashion, and it just seemed like such a mistake.
Actually,
anyway,
you just reminded me of something as well, like with the 32X, like that it was kind of plausible that this kind of thing could be done. But do you remember there was like I can't remember if it was Meme Machines or if it was Sega Magazine, but they did an April Fool's where if you get a Virtua Racing Deluxe and you write you know, on the Bay Bridge course, like there was like a random kind of big area like near the end that you could just go off, and if you drove your car around a Daytona, it would like unlock like a bunch of textures or something like that in the game, and some of the Daytona cars, and they kind of had cut out like screenshots of Daytona and like overlaid it onto like Virtua
Like
Racing
those
Deluxe,
devils.
and it was like I mean, you could see like straight away what it was, but at the same time we were like, should we give it a go? Yeah, let's give it a go just in case. It was like, so it was like the plausibility that the 32X had more juice in the tank sort of thing than what we were seeing. Like, it was a realistic proposition at that time. I think it was
I
like,
think that's called
you
reaching.
thought more was to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I mean, more like there was some interesting tech demos for the 32X and stuff that like had some good effects. I think you can watch a lot of videos now of stuff that like at the time they was in magazines, but we only had like still screenshots and that. But yeah, I've watched a few, and it's like some of them are pretty good. Like it's like, okay, yeah, I see what they were going for.
Stuff.
It had a bit of power in it.
I guess like a lot of Sega's history, it's like you look at the initial release of Virtua Fighter on the Saturn, and the audience that got, the reception that got, and then if they'd have gone straight to Virtua Fighter 2, how would it have happened? And if they had skipped the SVP chip and just released the 32X with Virtua Racing Deluxe, then how would that have played out? And you can't rewrite the history, but you do think it did its thinking out loud, Sega, and like let people know what it was doing. Perhaps just showed a bit too much of the workings out, just
right.
I don't know. Anyway, it was exciting.
That's what kept them interested. I loved it.
I agree.
They went out when they burned out, and rather than faded. Well, no, I guess they faded away a little bit, didn't they? But you know what I mean. They just throw it all in the ring and just like.
I'm just thinking, bearing in mind where that quote comes from, it's like, did Sega do that to himself?
They did after the Xbox, after those Xbox games, the ones that were originally going to be on the Dreamcast. It's like after that, it was kind of, they didn't really feel like Sega anymore.
Let's throw it at the towel. Let's talk other versions then. So we have tried a hand at the other ones. I think we both did a bit of 32X, didn't we? And like, where did you come out on it? Like, what were your thoughts comparing it to playing on Mega Drive?
Well, what I thought was like, I mean, like the frame rate is like slightly better, isn't it? I think it's like 20 frames or something like that. But
I think it's 20.
I think you kind of like got the terminology right. It felt a little twitchy, I think, by comparison. It was just like, I preferred the Mega Drive version in gameplay terms, like, and that's using the F1 car, and like I remember back in the day we always played the stock car, didn't we? And it's like much more fun, I think, and like after you played that for like a whole bunch of time, it's really hard to go back to the F1 car, and so I kind of like recorded like a bunch of gameplay using the stock car, and it was kind of fun and just like slidey and stuff. And I remember at the time, like, it was before the Saturn come out with Daytona and that, but I was kind of I kind of felt like I was in training on Virtua Racing Deluxe with the stock car, getting ready for Daytona and stuff.
Well, I was going to say the same.
It was satisfying.
I definitely remember playing Virtua Racing Deluxe and base thinking it's a bit of a poor man's Daytona, but at least I've got a stock car to race around, and
you get your eye in, ready for the game.
It was twitchy though, the Formula 1 car. It was very much like, obviously, if you've been playing with the steering wheel, like in the arcade, like none of these handling issues would have come out, or maybe they wouldn't have come out, but it's very much with a D-pad. Every press you did on 32X, the back would swing out wildly. It's like you're making the whole car like jerk from side to side. You think,
it didn't giving it the tap-a-roo, and it's just like,
it just and as well as like controlling weird, it just looks stupid as well. It just like undermined that slick, real 3D effect that could have been there by just having this weird twitchy car. But it definitely didn't handle right. I found like there were some of the really good lines in Virtua Racing, because it's not a power sliding Daytona Sega Rally type arcade. It is more about this front in a straight line speed, or in a straight line round chicanes, and stuff like that. And obviously the more complicated, like hard braking corners are a bit more F1 like, but those chicanes are great, and they feel like you can get the line right. They're really smooth and fun and fast, and a 32X just kind of trashed those. It just felt like you were trying to like keep it smooth through them, and it was twitching all over the place, and it just didn't feel
it really
fun.
threw me. Like I mean, I did like dial into it, I guess, eventually, but it was always, yeah, like you say, there was just something not quite there. And like when I went back to the Mega Drive version, it was like, because I thought I was like kidding myself, like, oh, am I just imagining it or something? But then when I went back to the Mega Drive version, I was like, oh no, this feels nice. It's
Yeah,
like,
I did the same.
even though it's technically inferior and that, and with worse frame rate, but the gameplay is just a little bit better, I thought.
Yeah, I went back to the Mega Drive and I would say enjoyed it more than when I played it the first time. It's like I played the Mega Drive and was like, oh, I'm feeling the graphics and I'm not quite kind of been able to dial into it. But I played 32X, which is not graphically like leaps and bounds better. We'll come back to that in a sec, but the handling's so off. When I went back to the Mega Drive, I really appreciated how good they'd got it, and really, it was so much more playable and more entertaining. But
but I guess that's why we stuck with the stock car so much as well, because we never played the prototype. That other car, the third car.
That was awful.
It was it was just horrible. I didn't like that car.
I mean, the thing is as well, it was how they're made for the courses. Obviously, the Formula One car should have driven the courses well if they designed it with the same handling as the arcade, but it just didn't seem to fit. But the stock car did work quite well with them, and then that prototype thing just didn't.
Especially the new core, like not particularly the fourth one, because like I said, I tried to play it and I just didn't get on with it. But the fifth one is the sand one. Do you remember? You go like two different directions around that mountain and stuff. Like I always loved playing the stock car on that one. That felt good.
Yeah, it felt like they had that in mind, or rather, the car physics in mind. And
it just worked.
I gotta say that on 32X, the graphics were a hindrance as well. Obviously, it's more colourful. It looks a bit prettier. It's got higher polygon count. It has got a smoother frame rate. But I remember the reviews at the time noticed this. The popping is not any better than Mega Drive. It's probably I think the draw distance. I don't know if it's slightly better, but playing it, I don't think it's noticeably any better, if at all. But the worst thing is, it just seems to pop in things really annoying times, whereas the Mega Drive never seemed to really trip me up. You could see the draw distance was a bit crap, but it didn't seem to get in the way. But there were definite corners on the 32X version where I was like, oh, for God's sake, it's like really annoying. And it's just so weird, because it's like, obviously should be more capable, but I just think they put the emphasis on the frame rate and not so much on the draw distance.
Maybe.
But
I mean, like the draw distance, like I was saying earlier, like Virtua Racing Deluxe was the first time I really noticed draw distance. I know it was because the graphics were a bit cleaner than the Mega Drive and all that sort of stuff. But I remember particularly as well, like there was an option in the replay where you could like go right high above the car. So it's almost like you're looking at like micro machines or something like that. Mega Drive from like much more like a much higher view. And the car, everything was just building around the car as you kind of went. And I was sort of like, that's when I was kind of first trying to understand about like the polygons and what you can see and like, being generated and stuff. And I think I described it as like, it looks like you're just driving through this floating island that's just kind of changing the whole time and that. But like, that was when I first really clocked that whole pop-up and clip-in
I remember it. And in a way, there was a certain coolness to it at the time, like being almost under the hood of it. But the technical side, if you compare, if obviously you compare it to other versions, like obviously you dial forwards to the Switch one, it's like the whole map is in memory, and it's quite amazing. But but that 32X one had its issues. Let's go from issues to the Saturn one, because like you didn't play the Saturn one, I don't think, did you?
I haven't played the Saturn one. No, I mean I heard about it. But like, I knew some of the history, like about Time Warner, how they didn't even get given like source code. They literally got given a Virtua Racing coin op, and they were like, "There you go, make that game on the Saturn."
Copy that. Like no one knows how to build for the Saturn. This is a really complicated arcade game. You don't know what you're doing, but go for it.
Knock yourself out.
So, what's the full title? Time Warner Interactive's VR Virtua Racing. I mean, the whole thing was a mess from start to finish. Like the title scheme was ridiculous. The music's all wrong. Like the music's not bad in itself, but they've gone, instead of like the kind of poppy synthy feel, they've gone for like quite heavy guitars, a bit more like I guess, a bit more Daytona Sega Rally like. They still do like the incidental thing, like where you go through checkouts and you get like checkouts, Tesco till. Yeah. Don't forget your club card. I'm having a moment. Checkpoints, and it kind of works and stuff, and the music is all right, but it just feels wrong. But the real problems are the graphics and handling so bad. Graphically, it did not look any better to me than the 32X one. I'm sure the polygon count is higher, but it just doesn't look any better. It's so rough, it's so jaggedy. The textures are so not textures. Sorry, I want to talk about like the polygon design of everything is so poor. Like they've really sort of shoehorned in these sprite-based backgrounds into things. It looks horrendous, and
oh man,
it just there's just silly things about, like, on what's the first track actually called? Jeez, I can't remember its name. Anyway,
Big Forest. Is that
right.
the one? Yeah.
We can overdub it.
Yeah.
Like one of those 90s films with the swearing.
I just do some mouth movement. And then you can just put whatever word over the top.
You could try this. I think it's called. There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That was textbook. Nice.
I think it is Big Forest. But there's, the bit where you've got the pirate ship like swinging in the background. Do you remember that bit? Like, I don't know if it's
yeah, like the amusement park, yeah.
It's just so stupid, but in the Saturn one, it's swinging like this. It just looks so dumb.
It's going crazy.
Just everything's a mess. But
maybe the controls broke or something in the little booth.
Yeah, I thought you meant in the game, because that was just what I was going to say.
Oh right, yeah.
It honestly, I have never played a game that's felt as broken as that. Honestly, it's like like if you watch the speedo, like on any racing game, it goes up quite smoothly. The car to drive feels like there's like a lurch to about 30 miles an hour, and then a massive lurch to almost full speed. And so when you're trying to like just get going or go around a corner or slow down, speed up, everything is so disjointed. The brakes don't seem to work. It feels like they need to replace the brake pads in the car. Like we get into sharp corners that on the good versions of Virtua Racing are really satisfying. Hang it wide, heavy brake really late, swing it around the corner. And on this game, you're like slamming the brakes on really early, and you're still like going straight across the corner. It's just it's just
that's
so
annoying.
Broken.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? That does sound like a bit like the PS2 version, because I was really thrown when I started playing that one. Because it's like I broke, and then the car just kind of kept going straight when I was trying to turn. I was like, what is happening?
Well, tell me about this. And that's all I've really got to say about the Saturn one. It's just a mess. It is genuinely a horrible game. And I'm gonna be blunt. I wish it didn't exist, because it's a staple on Sega and the Saturn and Virtua Racing.
Even though they outsourced it, it still hit them hard. Yeah. So I played the PS2 version, which is like, so we got it as part of the Sega Classics collection. I think here and America I got it, so it's like bundled with some other games. Like there's some really weird stuff. There's like remade versions of like Outrun and Golden Axe, but they are rubbish. It's like that's something to touch on another time. But like, the Japanese version was called Virtua Racing Flat Out. But I think that, as far as I understand, they're basically the same thing. And it's so yeah. I mean, my biggest gripe that I ever had with that game was to do with this sound effect that keeps playing the whole time. Like it's this, like if you slightly turn the car, it just plays this really small loop of like screeching tires, and it's like the whole time. It's like literally I had to turn the sound off when I first got it, because I just could not listen to this thing anymore, which was really annoying, because I was waiting for the PS2 version of the little ditties at the checkpoint. But that was like my biggest gripe that literally put me off back in the day. But just recently playing it now in context with these other versions of Virtua Racing, it was like what I was saying just a minute ago. So like the first corner I get to, it's like I'm trying to turn, and it just feels like the car is just going straight forward. And I was just like, oh man, it's like the turning arch is just really like stifled in comparison to the other version. Because like, I mean, after I had played this version, I was seeing if it was my imagination, and I went and I think I played like the 32X version. I ended up like basically driving into a wall too early because of like I was still on PS2 kind of controls in my head and stuff, because it was like, yeah, it's just it didn't feel good. Like, it's not right. It's like they've got it really wrong. And yeah, it was just a shame, because it's pretty good like in other regards, like it, so it runs at 60 frames, so like that's, you know, obviously the coin op like ran at 30, and so that was a nice kind of touch that they upgraded the frame rate. It looks like things are like built with like with far more polygons than the arcade, so it's like, I mean, like you can notice particularly on like rounded things like the wheels, like you can see like a lot more polygons on it than the arcade version. So they were like, you know, they were kind of like trying to do a little bit better than the arcade by the look of it. The draw distance still wasn't great. I was actually really surprised, like, because after playing, like, you know, I when I first got my PS2, I got like Gran Turismo 3 and stuff like that. It's like, you know, I think it was 60 frames a second, full textured polygons everywhere, like full draw distance, no pop-in or anything like that as far as I remember. And then to play like a kind of plain shaded polygon, like no texture mapping, you just wouldn't think on a PS2 that it would be pop up, but yeah, it's quite considerable actually. It's very, very strange. And
I wonder if they were just lazy, just like,
I don't know, it's weird.
In a bit.
Maybe, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, it's really peculiar, like just the whole thing, because it's like it's, you can kind of get on with it, like for the most part. It's not massively like terrible looking, but it's like I think they've added a couple of new tracks, and one of them you going around this kind of big city blocks and stuff, and they're all popping in, and it's really, really noticeable. But like, yeah, I mean, I kind of played the arcade version the most, just to concentrate on the main 3 Virtua Racing tracks and that. And I did dial into it. Like, I think I got like first place on one of the runs that I recorded on Expert. So it's like I obviously like got my head into it at some point, and you know, I did like it better the more it kind of went along. But I definitely probably wouldn't pick it above any of the other versions.
I'll have to see it, because that Saturn version's got a city block track in it as well. I'll have to see whether it's the same one. But yeah, they both sound pretty rough. And of course, that takes us to like the most recent version, or at least the most recent one we played, the Switch. And someone was saying on Twitter just this week, saying it's funny this wasn't released on PS4 or Xbox, which I didn't realise. It was just on Switch. But the Switch one is a real gem. Like, it's really, they've done a bloody good job.
It's the best version.
Yeah,
it's the best. If I was going to play Virtua Racing, I would play the Switch version, because it's basically the arcade version but with better graphics. So it's like 60 frames, so it's smoother. Like, you know, it's the same playability, but you know, it's got all the arcade sounds. Like when I basically, it was that thing what I was saying, like about how when I was playing it, that the engine noise, it's such a distinct engine noise, and it like just hearing it took me back. It was like that nostalgia moment. Like, it was like, you know, went back to 92 or whatever it was. It was just like, man, this is the one. And it's just so good, and plays so well, and looks so nice as well, with no pop-up or anything like that. It's the definitive version for me. So
I think you were saying them two have a strong reputation for the faithfulness of their games, and this is actually the first of their conversions I think I've played, because you were telling me about them, but genuinely it's the type of game you think, that's a team I want working on my game, because they have, I think they've, you know, it's like back when we were first talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, or any game where they do an update. Like, often I just want the game, I just want it to look good on my new TV. You know, I don't want it to be, I don't want you to change it, I don't want different physics, I don't want different music, I don't want different sound effects. I just want it to look better. And they've done that. And the little tweaks they have made, you know, the bits they've gone beyond, like the frame rate, the fact the draw distance is so perfect, you know, you can see the whole thing coming up before you. It is just beautiful. And the main thing is it plays so well, and it's obviously like the choice of controls, like you can use your analog stick, you can use D-pad and stuff. So I mainly play on D-pad because that's just what I'm used to at Virtua Racing.
Right.
The analog does work really nicely. And,
yeah, I did play with the analog on that one.
And I was going to throw it in when we were talking about being amazed by the arms, but of course you can go in cockpit view and get your little switch. So I've got a little.
Oh, you got a little
block,
wheel.
and like, well, it's not a wheel; it's like just a bit of plastic that you can put a Joy-Con on.
Yeah.
But I did like have a try. I was awful.
Oh, you should try that out. You should try it and see if the arms look the same. I would. I would be amazed.
We'll put it in underneath because I did get some footage of me doing it, but it's quite short-lived footage because it's so hard. I mean,
is it? Right?
You know, I'd been playing it solidly for 2 weeks by this point, and so like I was used to the tracks, but I just couldn't adjust. Bearing in mind the Switch one does handle really well. You know, it's not the game's fault; it was clearly mine. But maybe there's a tiny bit of like lag between like the turning and the controller, but it's probably just me being terrible. But it was still fun because you could sit in cockpit view and you could drive it like a car, and that really is taking it back to its roots, because like we were saying, some of the things with the first Virtua Racing game were just experiencing what it's like to be in a 3D world and change the view and sit in that cockpit and feel like you're the driver. And the Switch one does that, and it does it brilliantly. And amazingly, what did we pay for it? Because I've only just bought it while preparing this video, but it's like what, £6-7, and it's
I mean, I think I got it on a deal, and it was like, I think it was like literally £1.60 or something ridiculous. And I was like, I think it was like when we first got a Switch, actually, because I kind of bought it for the kids. Well, I say that it's like there were some games I wanted to play, obviously, but I just kind of went on there and I on the marketplace, whatever they call it, and I was like, oh my life, Virtua Racing for £1.60. I was like, it's like, well, I'm obviously having that. And like, actually, you know what? My kids play it. Like my daughter, like she plays it all the time. I walk past our living room and she's sitting there playing Virtua Racing on it, and I'm like, little pride moment there. It's like,
Actually, because it's funny to say that. I think of Virtua Racing back in the day having quite complicated controls because it was in 3D, but actually they're also relatively simple compared to, because there's no drift mechanics and stuff. It's just go around a course in a straight line, and it might be a bit more kid friendly, right? So
she was. I mean, she's pretty good actually with some of the games she plays. She plays Crazy Taxi as well and everything like that. So it's like she's well versed in the whole Sega.
Man, I shouldn't talk down to the next generation. They're going to wipe the floor with us. I'll throw in. So I did play arcade as well on the MAME emulator, and like I could get it running okay, and graphically like looks very nice and stuff on the PC, but obviously screwed something up with the controller inputs and like couldn't really make it playable. So I'm gonna have another go at that after this video. But it just made you think how wonderful the Switch one is, because you can just plug and play. No. It's
really
around.
good.
It's just
I've got like a nice controller as well that I play it on. It looks like some kind of copy of an Xbox 360 pad or something, and it feels nice on that. It's pretty good.
I think it was I was going to say, I think the only thing on the Switch one, which it doesn't really faze me at all other than doing the footage for this video, was that they have stripped the options right back. So instead of going the Time Warner route or the PS2 route of adding extra tracks and trying to bulk it out and stuff, there's no extra tracks, no extra cars. It's like, don't think there was even a practice mode, if I remember right, because I was trying to do footage on practice mode. Maybe there is. Actually.
Oh, really?
There's no practice mode on. No, I don't think there is. But it's like, but so what? It's the arcade game.
And that is kind of like, that is the dream for me. It's like, I was a little bit like, when they would add in other stuff, I kind of always felt a little bit that sometimes stuff got diluted a bit, and I just wanted the focused arcade. Like, and for this one particularly, I'm very glad, to be honest, that that's all it is really, except for the graphical improvements. It's always
confused me, blow my mind how like obviously arcades and home consoles sort of merged like towards Dreamcast era with Naomi and stuff, but It took that long, like 92, 93 to the Switch to be able to do the Virtua Racing properly. And it took it took 94, 95 Daytona to Xbox 360 to be able to do like a real, really faithful home conversion of that. And it just shows you like how amazing those games were, like both graphically, the engine, the power, and the things they achieved, but just I guess the physics and how like pinpoint perfect everything was about the gameplay that made them so hard to recreate.
I mean, even like you give someone the technology, like to be able to do these things. Sega still did these things, like to the extent where the gameplay was still amazing. It wasn't like a bad game. It's like they nailed these things and they just got them perfect. And that's just like such a skill that they had. Like they really just knew their things with these games, like the arcade, the gameplay and everything. Just always nailed it completely.
Because I was thinking that when you were saying, I respected Ridge Racer and it looked okay. Even against Daytona, it looked all right. Just it didn't have that kind of smooth textures, 60 frames per second beautifulness, and just wasn't as pretty.
They always use monitors with scan lines. I always remember that like Namco arcade. They looked liney. And it was like, that's why I referred to it looking mortal, because it's like my TV at home had lines on it, but it's like Daytona was like some kind of big cinema screen or something that was like perfect immense looking.
But it was the gameplay. I know like Ridge Race has its like huge fans and people do love its gameplay, but for me, there's just no argument. Like certainly that first Ridge Racer up against Daytona, it was just generic. It was just a paint by numbers.
Yeah, I'd take Daytona every day.
Yeah, there are corners. There is like a sort of power slide. There's mountain sections. There's ups and downs. It doesn't add up to anything. It's just kind of more like literally take things that should be in there, whack them in, and that's enough. Whereas Sega said, no, let's get the graphics right. Let's get the gameplay right. Let's get the scenery right, the music right. Let's make everything gel. And no one was close to them. And then even in the home ports, no one could come close to those arcades for a good 10, 15 years. So
that's true. Even Sega themselves.
Pretty as the Dreamcast Daytona was, it just wasn't right, was it? Just wasn't quite there. So
no, it was lacking slightly. I did really like that version though. It was good. Well, they just should have converted the original arcade now.
For a long time, I quite happily played that Dreamcast one, and it was sort of never really thought twice about it. It's a very enjoyable kind of version of it. But actually, I'm going to throw in one last random fact on the Virtua Racing home ports that I played before the Switch. None of the scenery is interactive. Do you remember like the little metal signs? I only really remember doing this in Daytona arcade, but the little metal signs, you could drive into them and smash them around the track and stuff.
Yeah.
If you do that on the home versions, like I think Mega Drive 32X and Saturn, you just drive through them like they're see through or not really there and stuff. But
just not
on the Switch
don't exist or something.
That was just one of those little Sega things.
Kudos for that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway,
attention to detail. I like it.
Yeah, you like it. Well, the big question. So, would you play it today?
I would play it and then probably move to the Switch version.
Same. I enjoy playing it, but I just I can't. Why would I play the Mega Drive version when I've got the Switch version? It's just it is exactly that. It takes what's good about the arcade, takes what's good about the Mega Drive version, and just makes it up to date. It doesn't lose the good bits. It just gives you more good bits. So same. It was good going back to the Mega Drive one, having a reminder of it. But it is, I can't like rose tint it like the dithering, the low colour, the low polygon, the pop in and stuff. It does detract from the gameplay, and why would you? You got the Switch one, which is just so beautiful. Yeah. So
because what you're always aiming for was it to be like the arcade version, and that Switch version is the arcade version and then some. So that's the one I would pick. But same. Like if my Mega Drive was set up, I would happily play Virtua Racing though, like a bunch on it, and I would I would enjoy it because of it's the gameplay. It's the second best version in my opinion after the Switch version.
And that's true of me as well, because I think it's on the Ambernick. Obviously, I don't have more up to date games than the Ambernick. It mainly goes up to 16-bit, and I have like a couple of times in the last fortnight where I've been playing. I've just had that and a roundabout with me, and I've got it out and quite happily just played the Mega Drive one. And obviously on the smaller screen, it's a bit more kind of forgiving as well if it's like shortcomings. Yeah. So yeah, it's nice. Oh, that was good. Good, good game, good chat, nice time.
GG, yeah,
GG's.
Yeah. I totally love going back to these games. This is like, you know, it's nice to have a reason to go and get stuck into them doing this little podcast thing.
Yeah, agreed. And bonus points for both of us because I've not had complaints from the girlfriend, who is the other
That's
side
always a good thing.
Maybe she was happily listening to the chat, thinking, "Oh, I must give the Virtua Racing Switch version a go."
Exactly. She's deeply involved in what we're talking about. I bet right now.
She's taking notes, scribbling it down. Oh, 6,500 polygons, very interesting.
It. Don't forget those numbers.
Well, the next one might wet a whistle even more. So seamlessly, we shall segue into a preview of what we're doing next. Would you like to do the big reveal?
Okie dokie. Alicia Dragoon. No relation to Panzer Dragoon, but it's a very cool, quite early Mega Drive game. Got like a girl in it, like shooting stuff with like lightning. It's really fun, and I think it was actually, was it the third Mega Drive game I ever owned? So yeah, it's got a place in my heart. So I'll be looking forward to going back to it. Yeah.
No relation to Alicia Silverstone either.
No.
Because it's spelled different. And also it's a first name.
I guess so.
I just wanted to join in. There's not many other Dragoons you can make a joke about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not related to Dragnet.
I don't know what the Dragoon part is. What's with the extra? Oh, I need to look that up. That could be a bit of research to do ahead of the next ep.
Well, that's 90s remix, isn't it? They probably just wanted, they probably wanted to call Panzer Dragoon Panzer Dragon, but they were like, no, we gotta mix it up. Let's make it a bit cooler. Dragoon. Yeah.
90s coolness.
90s was rocking it. Oh, well, we look forward to that. And I don't know. I have no idea what the time is, but I guess we've just about done our lot.
Yeah, I think so. So I guess all to say is...
I know it's coming.
Well, this has been great.